This happened about 5 years ago. My friend Eric and I decided to go camping for the weekend at a small, lesser-known campground in the mountains. We wanted to get away from crowds, so we picked a spot about half a mile from the nearest other campers. The first night was perfect. We cooked over the fire, had a few beers, and stayed up late talking under the stars. But the second night, that's when things got strange. Around 1 a.m, I woke up to Eric whispering my name. His voice was tense. I asked him what was wrong, and he pointed toward the tree line. I could barely make it out in the dark, but there was a figure, standing just far enough away that the firelight didn't touch them. Perfectly still, not moving, not saying a word, just watching. At first I thought maybe it was another camper who had wandered too far, but after a full minute of them not moving, I realized whoever it was wasn't lost. They were just standing there, facing our camp. Eric called out, "Hey, you okay?" No response. The figure didn't flinch, didn't move, just stood there. We both sat frozen for what felt like forever. Finally, I grabbed the flashlight and shined it toward the trees. And the second the beam hit the tree line, the person was gone. Not walking away, not turning, just gone. We didn't hear footsteps, we didn't see branches move. It was like they'd slipped into the dark the moment the light touched them. We barely slept after that. Every snap of a branch made us jump, and just when I was starting to calm down, I heard something new, a sound that made my blood run cold. A voice. From the woods, maybe 30 feet away, someone, "I can see you." That was it for us. We packed up what we could in the middle of the night, tossed it in the car, and drove off without even putting out the fire. When I tell people this story, most say it was probably just some creep messing with us. But here's what still keeps me up at night. This wasn't a busy campground. We hadn't seen another person all day. Our site was hidden, off trail, with no reason for anyone to just wander by. So if it really was just some random person out there, then they were watching us, following us, waiting for the perfect moment to step closer. And if it wasn't a person, then I don't even want to think about what was standing in those trees that night. Back in the 70s, I was 30 years old and went camping with 2 friends. One of us had years of camping experience, another had only done a few weekend trips, and the third friend, she had never spent a night outdoors before. We decided to stay in a remote section of the campground, tucked deep into the woods. It was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence where every small noise seems amplified, and every shadow seems alive. On the second afternoon, we spread out a bit, enjoying the solitude. I was gathering kindling near a small misty stream, and I kept feeling like someone, or something, was watching me from the trees. I would glance over my shoulder and see nothing, but every now and then, I swore I caught a glimpse of a dark shape slipping behind the trunks, moving just out of reach of the light. As the sun disappeared, we started a fire in a clearing. A park staff member came by with a cart of firewood and a few cold drinks. We all sat around talking, but even in the warmth of the fire, I felt the edges of the woods pressing in, like invisible eyes watching us from the darkness. Later, after dark, faint voices echoed from a trail a few miles away. A trail that should have been empty. The staff member and one of my friends walked over to investigate, leaving just me and the newcomer by the fire. That's when it hit me. A sudden, icy wind swept through the clearing, carrying a faint whisper I couldn't understand. The fire flickered violently, casting moving shadows that looked wrong. My heart began to race. The forest felt alive, watching, breathing. I glanced at my friend, and she was staring at me, wide-eyed. She whispered, "Something's out there," her eyes scanning the shadows. I nodded. We both knew we had to move, fast. We walked slowly at first, trying not to panic. But halfway to the car, the shadows seemed to stretch and twist, almost following us. Every snapped twig made us jump. Every rustle in the brush sounded like something moving just behind us. Without a word, we broke into a full sprint. Once inside the car, we locked the doors and turned on the headlights. The forest around us was oppressively silent. But even with the lights on, I kept feeling movement at the edge of my vision. Shapes that vanished the second I tried to focus on them. Minutes dragged by like hours, and then, just as suddenly as it appeared, the presence lifted. The air lightened, the tension left. But the memory of it, the sensation of being watched by something that shouldn't exist, never went away. The others returned a short while later, laughing nervously about campers they had found off trail. But we knew better. I don't know what it was, but I know we barely escaped something out there. When I was around 16 or 17 years old, my family would go camping at a state park almost every summer. At night, my friend and I had this little tradition we called the ritual. Basically, after dark, we'd take a walk into the woods. It was our way of testing ourselves, seeing how far we could go before fear got the better of us. Normally, we never strayed too far from the campground, but one particular night we decided to push it further. We walked deeper than we ever had before. We had flashlights with us, but half the fun was turning them off and trying to walk blind, letting our eyes adjust to the dark while the woods around us came alive with sounds. We were about half a mile from the nearest campsite when it happened. A voice. Faint whispering. Right behind us. We froze, snapped our flashlights on, and spun around. The beams cut through the trees. But there was nothing. Just empty woods. We told ourselves it was probably the wind carrying voices from another site. Keep walking. But then it came again. The whispering. Closer this time. We stopped, sweeping the darkness with our lights, and that's when we saw movement. At first I thought it was an animal crawling across the forest floor, but when my flashlight hit it, I realized it was a woman. She was on her hands and knees, dragging herself forward. Her clothes were filthy, dark, torn in places. Her hair hung in her face, matted with dirt, and all the while she was whispering nonsense, random, broken words that didn't connect. When she noticed we were staring, she suddenly stood up. The way she rose didn't feel natural. It was jerky, unsteady, like her body wasn't fully listening to her. And then she spoke. Calm, almost rehearsed. She said she was looking for her campsite. Neither of us knew what to do. Something about her made us uneasy, but we were too freaked out to just leave her in the woods. So we offered to walk her back. The whole way, she muttered under her breath, streams of words that didn't make sense, sometimes punctuated with a soft laugh that felt way too deliberate. My friend and I barely spoke. We just wanted to get her out of the woods. Finally, we found her group near a campfire. Her friends looked relaxed, drinking, chatting, like nothing was wrong. When we brought her over, they barely reacted. One of them brushed it off, saying she'd been drinking a lot and must have gotten lost on her way to the bathroom. But here's what still unsettles me. She wasn't stumbling drunk. She wasn't acting wasted. She was crawling on the ground, whispering into the dark. And I can't stop thinking about the way she moved, like she wasn't alone in her own body. About 10 years ago, I went camping at a popular spring with a few friends. It was late at night, and I was lying in my tent, starting to drift off to sleep, when I heard something that made my stomach drop. The sound of a massive tree collapsing. If you've ever heard it in real life, you know how different it sounds from movies. There's this deep, violent cracking echo that rips through the woods, followed by a heavy crash that shakes the ground beneath you. At first, I didn't think too much of it. Trees fall sometimes. But about 10 minutes later, I started hearing voices, dozens of them. People were outside, panicked, yelling for help. Their footsteps pounded past my tent in every direction. That's when I unzipped the flap and stepped out. The tree hadn't just fallen randomly. It landed directly on someone's tent, only a short distance from mine. The scene was chaos. Campers were crowded around, pulling at fabric and broken branches. The tree was massive, splintered, and crushing everything beneath it. And the worst part? Someone had been inside. The weight of the trunk had trapped them completely. Not long after, the sound of rotor blades echoed through the night sky. A helicopter had to come and carefully lift the person out of the campground. Everyone stood in silence, watching. The only sounds were the chopping of the helicopter and the groan of the tree as rescuers tried to move it. I'll never forget how close it was, just a few dozen feet away from where I was sleeping. If I had pitched my tent slightly differently that night, it could have been me. Now, every time I hear a tree groan in the wind, I freeze up, because I know how real it is. Sometimes, when a tree falls in the woods, it doesn't just make a sound. Sometimes, it changes everything around it.